If one day your childhood friends suddenly came back as bloodthirsty, half-human abominations and started mutilating everyone in sight, what would you do? Pooh and his friends are tired of society treating them like monsters, and now they're coming back for revenge. But the truth about their creation is a shocking twist that's crazier than anything that you could possibly imagine. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the return of Pooh in Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Sometime after the events of the first 100-acre massacre, the abomination known as Pooh and his gang of human-animal hybrid friends are about to return for another unhinged rampage of death and destruction. As the police failed to prove what really happened during the attacks, the public's suspicion fell on the only survivor, Christopher Robin, who dedicated his life to becoming a doctor as a way to make up for his mistakes. Meanwhile, mobs of angry locals descended on the forest and destroyed Pooh's home, causing him to reunite with his old friends Owl and Tigger in order to survive the harsh winter. Now it's time for Pooh to strike back, and this time he's going to poo all over the entire city. Late one foggy night somewhere out in the 100-acre wood, a group of 3 college students are camped out in their RV, attempting to make contact with the spirits of Pooh's previous victims. But that was their biggest mistake. During the seance, one of the girls asks for a sign that the spirits are nearby, and right at that moment, the entire trailer lurches to the side like it's been hit by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. But the truth is that it's something much worse. The girls begin to panic as they hear a demonic voice taunting them from outside, when suddenly, out of absolutely nowhere, someone stabs straight through the side of the trailer and impales one of them through the chest with a metal pole. Terrified, another girl runs for the exit, but Pooh slams her fingers in the door as she reaches to open it, leaving her hand completely mangled. With the 2 survivors still inside, Pooh begins trying to flip the entire trailer into the lake, but one of them is able to jump out through a window on the opposite side. She makes it to a golf cart that's parked nearby, but by the time that she finally gets it started, Pooh is already right on her ass. And she's so distracted by him that she doesn't notice a bear trap lying in the road up ahead. As the trailer explodes in a ball of flames, she tries to make a break for it on foot, but ends up stepping right into the same bear trap that she just ran over. Pooh drags her back to where her friend can see, and then starts breaking the woman's arms and legs one after another. But he's not done with her yet. Grabbing the bear trap, he places it on the ground in front of her and forces the woman down face first right into it, finally putting her out of her misery. The girl with the broken fingers is somehow still alive after narrowly escaping from the RV fire, but this time it's Owl who finishes the job, and after taunting her for looking even uglier than him, he picks up a heavy branch and slams it down onto the girl's head. Their rampage is only just getting started, and that makes 3 victims down with a lot more to go. Okay, damn! That was brutal. Come to think of it, this might be the worst camping trip since those kids went missing at Camp Crystal Lake back in the 80s. I think that it's safe to say that these girls never stood a chance, but sooner or later, someone's going to have to put a stop to Pooh's reign of terror. So, what could they have done differently? Just coming out here was already a bad choice, but there's no time to worry about that when Pooh's already kicking down your door. Once the gets real, how you react here is going to mean a difference between ending up like these girls or making it out alive. So let's see if we can learn anything from their mistakes. Now, what we're not going to do is immediately panic and let the situation instantly spiral out of control. That's going to be easier said than done when you're being attacked by one of the most horrifying mutations that the world has ever seen. But we have to keep it together here if we're going to survive. As soon as they realized that someone was out there, they should have quickly turned off the lights and shut the blinds, so that the attacker couldn't see inside. After that, what they'd want to do next is get away from any windows and group up in the center of the trailer so that it'd be harder to catch them by surprise. Once the fight officially kicks off, then they'll need to be able to defend themselves, and the only way to do that is to get their hands on some weapons. They'll have to work with whatever they've got, but since they're here on a camping trip, they should have access to survival gear, sports equipment, tools for the van like a tire iron, or even some knives and frying pans from the kitchen that they could make use of. With that being said, after seeing what Pooh here is capable of, anything short of a bazooka isn't going to be that much help. and it would be much better if we could find a way to scare him off without getting into a fight. It's a long shot, sure, but if the girls had used their keys to set off their car alarms, maybe this could have drawn some attention from anyone friendly who might have been nearby, and possibly even scared their attackers away. Now, teamwork is a good place to start, but when things inevitably go wrong and the situation does turn into every camper for themselves, there's no shame in being the first to accept reality and start running for your life. Remember, you don't have to run faster than Pooh to get away. You just have to run faster than the person next to you. And you'd be surprised how often that advice comes in handy around here. Since there's only 2 attackers and 3 girls, this gives us the option to use the other 2 as meat shields, while we get a head start on our escape. Once Pooh started threatening to throw the entire trailer into the lake, at that point, making a quick exit was exactly the right idea. And the girl who did that was the only one who stood any chance of survival at all. She even managed to make it to an escape vehicle, and might have actually made it out if she hadn't blown a tire on that bear trap. Speaking of that, can anyone explain why getting a flat tire made the golf cart come to an instant stop? I mean, it would definitely slow you down a bit, but she should have been able to keep driving, right? She should have kept flooring it out of there or immediately jumped out and started running on foot instead. Although, in that case, she probably wouldn't have made it very far anyway before Pooh and Owl eventually hunted her down. Before we move on, let's take a minute to talk about the real stars of the show. As we find out later in the story, Pooh, Owl, and their friends here are actually the terrifying products of genetic experiments that involved splicing animal and human DNA, which somehow resulted in them gaining superhuman strength, durability, endurance, and regenerative abilities. Pooh here is at least 6.5 feet tall, looks like he's gotta weigh more than 250 pounds, and has extra long arms with razor-sharp claws at the ends for tearing his victims to pieces with ease. It's a little too late now, but it looks like he could have had a solid career in the NBA if he hadn't turned to a life of crime. We've seen from his last appearance that he can easily take on 4 opponents at once, and it looks like he's only gotten stronger since then. That trailer is probably somewhere around 5,000 pounds, and the strength that it would have taken to flip it single-handedly is preposterous, indicating that he's much stronger than your average person. Getting into a fist fight with him definitely isn't going to end how you hope, but what makes these creatures even more dangerous is that their animal hybrid nature most likely gives them the strengths of the animal as well. As a bear, Pooh will not only have impressive strength and size, but also highly tuned senses of smell and hearing that allows him to detect his prey. He'll also have better eyesight in the dark than your average human thanks to his tapetum lucidium, a reflective layer behind their retinas that helps to enhance bears' abilities to see in low-light conditions. This is bad for us because it's going to make it extremely difficult to sneak up on Pooh for a kill shot, and also much harder to hide from him when he's chasing you. Although they're not as big as bears, owls are ferocious predators in their own right, with natural abilities like silent flight, exceptional hearing, superior vision, razor-sharp talons, and even better nocturnal adaptations than Pooh. This makes fighting them a serious challenge, but if we're creative, then there might be ways that we could actually use these adaptations against them. Like, for example, it could be possible to use bright lights to temporarily blind Owl, camouflage yourself, and mask your scent as a way to hide from Pooh. Or even use Pooh's relatively low intelligence against him by setting up traps and creating distractions, which we'll get back to later. Overall, the moral of the story is that you just don't go around in Pooh's woods. But there's some people back in town who still don't get the idea, and they're about to find out that Christopher has really been telling the truth all along. Catching up with Christopher Robin, he's been seeing a therapist trying to figure out what really happened to him back when he was a child. After this particular visit, his friend Lexi flags him down from across the street and insists on giving him a ride home, even though Christopher's worried that she'll become a target to the people who've been harassing him and his family since Pooh Pooh first attacked. Sure enough, when they get back to Christopher's parents' house, his friend Finn shows him that someone came along and wrote "murderer" in red paint on the side of his car. His dad reassures him that things will get better if he gives it time, but Christopher here isn't so sure. Out in the woods, 2 police officers discover the scene of Pooh's latest massacre and call it in, completely horrified by what they've just witnessed. When news of the attack gets around, one of the victim's boyfriends rounds up 2 of his buddies and goes out into the 100-acre wood looking for revenge. The only problem is, Pooh is the one who's going to be hunting them. It isn't long before they're spotted by Owl, who brings the news back to Pooh in their evil lair. Realizing that the humans won't stop until they're dead, they decide that it's time for them to attack first. And there's one person who Pooh wants revenge on more than any other, that Christopher Robin. Before Pooh takes on Christopher though, he's going to have to deal with the hunters first. The 3 men creep through the woods, jumping at every noise, until one of them thinks that they might have seen something off in the trees, and their leader orders him to go and check it out. After a while, the other 2 start to get worried when they realize that he isn't coming back, and that's when they hear the unmistakable sound of something circling them in. They're distracted by a noise from the trees above them, when all of a sudden, Piglet bursts out of the shadows and disarms one of the men by knocking his weapon away with a heavy branch. The man is able to roll out of the way just in time as Piglet goes in for the kill, and as soon as he's clear, the group's leader raises his shotgun and blows Piglet's head off like a balloon filled with jelly. That makes 1 abomination down with 3 more to go, but the men aren't safe yet. Meanwhile, Pooh attacks the 3rd hunter with a bat to the side of the head, and bites his throat out before the others can come to his rescue. Hearing his screams, his friends rush over to help him, but Pooh immediately ambushes them too. In the scuffle, one of the men accidentally gets half of his face blown off, and Pooh kills the leader by shoving the barrel of the shotgun straight through his head from the bottom up, lifting his body into the air and roaring triumphantly straight in his face. Somehow, the injured man is still alive and staggers out to the nearby road after Pooh leaves, assuming that he's already dead. That makes 5 victims down, with an entire town more to go. Okay, I guess that didn't go as planned. Unlike the last girls, these guys started off surprisingly strong. They even managed to take one of these freaks out before they all got killed. The only problem was they should have taken Pooh and his friends a lot more seriously as a threat. Their hearts were in the right place, but if they just had a better plan, they might have actually got them all, or at least stood a chance. First things first, they should have known better than to split up. If there's one thing that's almost always a bad idea in any monster hunting scenario, it's splitting up. Never do it unless there's really no other choice. I don't know who's the bigger idiot here, the guy who told them to split up, or the guy who actually agrees to go out into the woods on his own. But they were both stupid for trying it, and now they're both dead. Don't be like these guys. It's common knowledge that there's always safety in numbers. By sticking together and forming a tight circle, they would have had the benefit of someone watching every angle, and been much better prepared to fend off an ambush when it happened. Better yet, don't just go stomping around and shouting into the darkness loudly announcing your presence. Instead, try to use the one advantage that you'd have in the fight, which is the element of surprise. It's safe to imagine that these guys had at least some idea that they were hunting human-animal hybrids, because they kept referring to Pooh and his friends as those freaks. Knowing this, it would have been a better strategy to hunt these animals like you would in real life. One thing that they should know about bears is that they can sometimes be extremely defensive of their territory, especially when they feel threatened. If that's the case, then it would obviously be better not to let Pooh know that you're here looking for a fight by doing things like firing off random shots into the air. To give themselves the best chances of winning the fight, a much better strategy would have been to remain as quiet as possible and use the scent-blocking clothing or sprays as a way to counter Pooh's keen sense of smell. Instead of going out and searching for Pooh, they could have set up a blind, like real hunters, and waited for Pooh to come to them. They could even set up traps to catch Pooh, or to distract him and buy them some time if they need to make a quick escape. We know that Pooh and his friends are starving, and that's part of the reason why they went on this rampage in the first place. Well, maybe we can use food as bait to lure them into a trap for an easy kill. Taking this idea a step further, they could even try to leave out some jars of poisoned honey and take Pooh down without even having to fight him head on. Like we mentioned before, some bright lights would have helped these hunters to find their way around, and could also be used to stun the creatures during a fight, opening them up for a critical hit or creating a window for you to get away. Obviously, we aren't exactly dealing with the sharpest tools in the shed here, because after finding their friend horribly mutilated by some sort of genetic nightmare, these geniuses immediately let their guard down, when what they should have done was either get ready to fight whatever attacked him, or just started running for their lives. They might be dead, but at least on the bright side, there is one less threat out there now thanks to their efforts. And we also learned something important about what it takes to put one of these freaks down. During the fight, we learned that Pooh and the others can be killed with extreme violence, as long as you're able to do enough damage to cancel out their regenerative abilities. You know, the last time we saw Piglet, he got clubbed over the head with a sledgehammer, and honestly, I can't be the only one who thought that he was dead as but he only seems to have gotten stronger since then. This means that liberal use of the double tap strategy is going to be the bare minimum. Bare minimum? And if by some miracle you do manage to take one of them down, then it would be a wise idea to burn the body as a way to guarantee that you really finished the job. You know, what these idiots don't even realize is that they've just given Pooh all of the inspiration that he needs to attack the town itself and put the lives of everyone who lives there in danger. At least the only guy who survived can now tell the world the truth so that the military can get involved. But for some reason, an unlucky dork named Christopher Robin is going to have to figure it out all by himself. Back in town, we find Chris working the day shift at the local hospital, doing his best to be a contributing member of society and put the events of his past behind him. Unfortunately, it looks like he's about to relive the same nightmare all over again. After finishing up with a patient, Christopher's boss pulls him aside, explaining that he's been getting pressure from the higher-ups, who don't like the negative attention that he brings to the hospital, and says that he's made the decision to let Christopher go. As he's getting ready to leave, a team of nurses rushes in with the only survivor of Pooh's latest attack, and Christopher recognizes the man as one of his former classmates. Nobody's sure what all happened to him just yet, but Christopher here instantly gets the feeling that he knows exactly who's responsible. Back at home, Christopher's parents send him upstairs to get his younger sister Bunny out of her room for dinner. He finds the girl creating a weird little voodoo doll type of thing out of a teddy bear that she took from their long-lost brother Billy's room, who was mysteriously kidnapped when he and Christopher were just children. She says that it's meant to protect them from the evil monsters who live out in the woods, and Christopher here promises the girl that he won't let anything bad happen to their family ever again. Boy, oh boy, is he going to be dead wrong about that one. Meanwhile, this young kid and his father here idiotically decide that today would be a great day to do some bird watching out in Pooh's murder forest. As the kid looks around the woods with his binoculars, he's excited to spot all kinds of harmless birds, when suddenly he's startled to see Al staring right back at him through the leaves. Terrified, the boy runs to take cover behind a small tree, just as Al swoops down and carries his father away before the man can even react. Somewhere nearby, Pooh and Al divide up the man's body and watch from a walk bridge as his severed arms and legs float away down the stream. That makes another innocent victim down, and now it's time for Pooh and his friends to go after the town itself. Okay, 1 minute you're out enjoying some nature, and the next, your 10-year-old son is watching you be carried away by an actual cryptid that looks like something out of a furry's fever dream. I actually counted the time that you were on screen, and you spent less than 60 seconds alive before meeting your gruesome fate, which would honestly be impressive if it wasn't so embarrassing. I think that we all know what I'm about to say next. This kid's dad? You f***ed up. What, did the two of you just fly in from Stupidville or something? Maybe you should have read up on the town's history a bit before going out in the woods for some father-son bird watching, because it looks like the birds were the ones watching you all along. I don't know how you missed it there, my guy, but in case you forgot, there have been like 15 people killed out here over the span of just the last year. In fact, it's gotten so bad that mobs of angry villagers have taken to the forest with pitchforks and torches on more than one occasion. And you thought that this would be a fun place to bring a kid. No wonder your wife isn't with you if you're always coming up with ideas like this. Your poor kid was the only one with any common sense because he ran for his life as soon as he saw the creature. But while he was busy evacuating the area like he'd just seen the Grim Reaper himself, you chose to stand there like a deer in headlights and ended up paying the ultimate price. You're lucky that Owl didn't get little Timmy here too, but now he's gonna have to grow up with the trauma of having seen his dad be taken away by an owl man. Not only is he going to be scared of birds for the rest of his life, but the worst part is that no one is even going to believe him when he tries to tell them what happened. That's a great way to mess up a kid's life before it even gets started. Good job, Father of the Year! When your nature walk ends with you being brutally killed by a genetic monstrosity in front of your 10-year-old son, sorry, Pops, but you kind of f***ed up. That afternoon, Christopher pays another visit to his therapist's office, where he and the doctor are still trying to get to the bottom of his brother's mysterious disappearance all those years back. The doctor explains that sometimes our minds will intentionally block out traumatic experiences from our childhood, and she wants to try hypnotizing him as a way to possibly draw his memories of what happened that day back to the surface. Listening to the woman's instructions, Christopher begins to drift off into an altered state of consciousness, bringing him back to his first interactions with his childhood friend, Pooh. Although Christopher only saw Pooh as a friend, the reality was that he'd always been a bloodthirsty monster, but the boy's childish mind prevented him from fully grasping the terrifying truth. Eventually, he's brought back to the morning when it all began, the birthday party where his brother Billy went missing. That day, while playing hide-and-seek in the woods with their friends, Christopher witnessed his brother being kidnapped by a man driving a beat-up white van. But no matter how hard he tries, he can't seem to remember what the man actually looked like. Snapping out of it, Christopher anxiously explains to the doctor what he saw, and she reassures him that they can fully trigger the memory if he just gives it time. But what neither of them realize is that the truth about what happened to Billy is even more disturbing than they could possibly imagine. Afterwards, Christopher calls up Lexi to talk about what happened, and she still can't believe that no one was ever able to find his brother's kidnapper. She's busy babysitting a slasher film-obsessed little maniac from their neighborhood named Freddy, who's been rampaging around the house all night wearing his hockey mask and setting up booby traps. Having a change of heart, Christopher apologizes for trying to push her away, and thanks Lexi for always having his back, even though it seems like everyone else in their town thinks that he's some kind of psycho. She tells him not to mention it. After all, that's what friends are for. But it won't be long before she realizes that the monsters from his past are coming back for revenge. And this time, every single person that Christopher knows is about to be on their hit list. Back in the woods, a group of officers who've been investigating the recent attacks just so happens to stumble across Owl's tree cave hideout, never suspecting that they're already being watched. The place looks empty except for the random body parts and severed heads from the creature's victims, but there's still one more abomination who hasn't come out to play until now, and he's the most determined one out of them all. Just then, a heavy steel door that looks like some kind of prison cell swings open at the back of the cave, and inside, the officers find even more body bags hanging upside down from the ceiling. Horrified, one of the officers wisely suggests that they get the hell out of there, but by then it's already too late. Suddenly, the human-tiger hybrid Tigger appears from behind and drives his claw straight through the first officer's chest, before instantly tearing the others to shreds with no chance of them fighting back. That makes 3 more victims down, and now the real rampage is about to begin. Okay, if you thought Pooh was dangerous, then I've got some bad news. Pooh may be their leader, but Tigger here is the most sadistic one of them all. As a matter of fact, it looks like he's so dangerous that Pooh and the others actually needed to keep him locked up until they decided that peace was no longer an option. And even if the other abominations are afraid of him, then I'd hate to see what Tigger here is really capable of. Just like Pooh and Owl, Tigger here is not only going to have superhuman strength and durability and regeneration, generation, but he's also going to have all of the natural abilities of his tiger half. And that might be even scarier than a bear. This would make him incredibly agile, strong, and stealthy, and also give him an excellent eyesight, hearing, and smell, as well as being one of the strongest bite forces in the entire animal kingdom. Fighting him directly is going to be a death sentence, and instead, the safest way to beat him would be to try to outsmart him. This could involve using poison or some other sort of trap, or to use the element of surprise to hit him with an overwhelming amount of force before he even knows you're there. Either way, it's not going to be easy, and you'll stand pretty much no chance of taking him on in a fair fight. Now, letting Tigger get the jump on you means that it's all over, which is why these officers messed up big time by just walking into his cave unarmed instead of coming up with a plan or at least waiting for more backup. I'm sorry, but was the actual graveyard directly behind the tree not a big enough warning sign that they were about to be in for some serious trouble? I mean, hey, call me paranoid, but the instant that I laid eyes on the severed heads and body parts that they were keeping down there, I would have gotten the absolute hell out of there and waited for the people with some real firepower to arrive. You can't fight human-animal hybrids with nothing but flashlights and walkie-talkies, as these officers just learned the hard way. Next time, I'd immediately back up out of there and take a more careful approach in case whoever's been collecting those human remains was still nearby. That night, Christopher decides to do some more research into the incident for himself, and that's when he makes the beginnings of a shocking discovery. Shortly after his brother went missing, a mysterious fire burned down the house of a genetic scientist who lived somewhere nearby, resulting in the man's death. Although the authorities never pinned down what caused it, the truth is that what happened there was no accident. And soon, Christopher is going to realize that this story and his brother's disappearance are connected in a way that changes everything. Determined to get some answers, Christopher decides to follow up on the only lead that he has left, the hunter who managed to survive one of Pooh's attacks. The man's injuries are too severe for him to speak, but using a whiteboard, he writes down a 3-word message, simply reading, "You were right." Just then, Christopher notices the hospital's janitor watching them through the window, and all at once, the memories suddenly come flooding back. He's looking right at the creep who kidnapped his little brother. By the time that he goes to confront him, the man has already disappeared, but Christopher here isn't about to let him get away a second time. Meanwhile, Christopher's buddy Finn is at home taking a shower when he overhears some sort of demonic dry heaving coming from somewhere else in the house. Confused, he wanders into the kitchen to investigate, where he steps on a slimy pile of some disgusting substance that's lying there on the floor. The trail leads him outside until suddenly he finds himself face to face with Owl, and the monster quickly tackles him to the ground. Fighting back, Finn desperately reaches for a nearby brick, but it's already too late. An owl leans over him, vomiting up acidic bile that melts the skin right off of the man's face, before jamming his claw straight through both of his eyeballs. It might be the most brutal death yet, and that adds yet another innocent victim to the monster's kill count. Okay, talk about terrible survival skills. This idiot walked right into an owl ambush and didn't even put up so much as a fight. That's embarrassing, and more importantly, easily avoidable. Here's what he should have done differently. Now, maybe you're willing to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. After all, who would expect to be attacked by a 6-foot-tall owl man anyway? Well, that may seem like an unlikely scenario, but we can't forget that this guy is one of the only people in town who actually believes Chris. Unlike the other victims, Finn here was fully aware that there were human-animal hybrids out there who might come after anyone who's close to Christopher. But it seems like he forgot all about that tiny little detail when it actually mattered the most. Like, put yourself in his shoes for a minute. You're home alone when suddenly there's a strange noise from the kitchen, and when you walk in, you find giant piles of owl pellets all over the kitchen floor. Is that not at least a little bit suspicious to you? What we're not going to do at this moment is walk outside with nothing but a towel on like Stacy's mom. What we are going to do is lock the door and immediately grab the nearest heavy blunt object. Blindly going outside was basically a death sentence, with or without a weapon, since this guy had terrible chances of actually beating Owl in a fight to begin with. Once he was tackled, the only option left would have been to quickly scoop up some of the loose gravel and throw it into Owl's eyes, hopefully blinding him long enough for you to get away. Think Dale Gribble's pocket sand strategy. You never know when you might need some for a quick escape. On the bright side, at least now Christopher finally knows the identity of the man who took his brother. He should probably let the police take it from here, since he's already known around town as a dangerous maniac, but instead, he's about to do the exact opposite. Waiting outside the hospital for the man to get off his shift, Christopher finally spots his brother's kidnapper and manages to follow him home undetected. After climbing through an unlocked window, he quietly sneaks around the house until he finds the man upstairs in his office, taking him by surprise. Instead of trying to fight, the man decides that he's finally ready to come clean, and that's when Christopher learns the disturbing truth. It turns out that this guy had been working for the doctor who hired him to go out and find children as test subjects for his depraved genetic experiments, combining human and animal DNA. Haunted by guilt, the man eventually returned to kill the doctor and burn the evidence. But not before the doctor became so afraid of his own creations that he decided to destroy them and start over again. The thing is, the experiments didn't stay dead, and what crawled out of their unmarked graves are the very same creatures that are now terrorizing the town. While checking up on Freddy, Lexi hears a loud crash from down on the first floor and quickly realizes that someone must be in the house. At the same time, the boy's grandfather, who works for the local police, gets nervous when he can't reach Freddy over the phone and radios in for another officer to go over there and check it out. Thinking quickly, the two of them take cover in the boy's blanket fort and decide to send an RC car with a camera on it to take a look around. Sure enough, there's Pooh standing in the kitchen, and after curb stomping the toy, he makes his way up the stairs to find them, but they narrowly manage to escape while his back is turned, rushing outside where they're met by a group of officers. One of the officers decides to check the shed out back, but just as she realizes that this might have been a bad idea, Pooh lunges at her from out of the darkness, tearing off the woman's arm, and so far that makes 11 victims down, with even more on the way. After leaving the kidnapper's house, Christopher sits in his car listening to the Mad Doctor's final recording. The man explains that his genetic experiments gave the children their animalistic appearance, as well as superhuman strength and regenerative abilities. The only problem was that they couldn't be controlled, which is why he chose to kill them all off before they could turn on him instead. Realizing that his friends could be in danger, Christopher immediately calls up Lexi, and he's relieved to hear that she's alright. But with Finn dead, they're starting to notice a pattern. It seems like the creatures are attacking anyone that he's close to, and that's when Christopher suddenly realizes where they'll be headed next. At the same moment, Pooh here is already outside of Christopher's parents' house. While his dad and little sister are busy playing upstairs, Pooh sneaks in on Christopher's mother, who's alone unloading the dishwasher, and slams her down face first onto the kitchen knives. Hearing the commotion, Christopher's father runs to check it out, and although we don't get to see how he dies, Pooh makes short work of him too. This only leaves Bunny still alive, and after stopping by for a not-so-nostalgic visit to his old childhood room, Pooh takes the girl and disappears back into the night, making 13 victims down with dozens more still to go. Christopher arrives at the house just a moment too late, only to find both of his parents horrifically murdered in the kitchen, with no trace of his sister or their attacker anywhere in sight. Heartbroken, he collapses to the kitchen floor, screaming with guilt, but there's no time to waste. He still needs to stop Pooh and find his sister before it's too late. Okay, yikes. I know that people take the right away to load the dishwasher pretty seriously, but I never thought that it would mean the difference between life and death. For the family of the guy who's had his whole life turned upside down by a gang of violent mutants, you'd think that they'd be a little bit more concerned for their safety. I mean, there literally is a group of deranged monstrosities on the loose, and these morons didn't even lock their front door. Seriously, have a little sense of home security, people. That's bad enough, but then Chris's dad here heard his wife screaming bloody murder and just casually went to check it out like it was no big deal. If they'd been just a little bit more aware of their surroundings, then they might have been able to use those knives to fight Pooh instead. But now, it looks like Christopher only has one family member left standing. Speaking of family, finding out that Pooh here really is Chris's brother might be the biggest twist, since finding out Vader is Luke's dad. And there's a chance that this changes things just a bit, because now Chris might be interested in finding a more peaceful solution. He could try using some hypnotism skills that he might have picked up from therapy to hypnotize Pooh and bring out his inner child as a way to resolve things without having to fight him. Although, at this point, he probably can't be allowed to live after all of the depraved crimes that he's committed. With that being said, he might still be able to use Pooh's childhood memories as a distraction to catch his attention long enough that gives Chris a chance to either escape or go in for the kill shot. We know that part of the gene splicing process led to Pooh and his friends developing their insane regeneration abilities. Maybe it could be possible to reverse engineer a counter agent that cancels out their rapid healing. Obviously, it's not something that Christopher himself can do here and now, but if they keep coming back and harassing the town, then it's definitely a plan worth considering in the long run. We see something similar to this in nature already, where some species of lizards are able to regenerate entire body parts, thanks to the specialized stem cells that can form into other cell types to regenerate muscle tissue, nerves, and blood vessels. To cancel out Pooh's regeneration, the boys in the lab would first have to pinpoint the genes responsible for the regenerative effects. Then, they could design a counteracting genetic sequence to neutralize the regenerative effects, using gene editing technology like the CRISPR system. Finally, they'd need to inject Pooh with a vaccine that uses a virus to target the specific genes, and introduce the counteractive material into his system. It's gonna take some serious work, but it might be the only reliable method to stop Pooh and his pals from coming back. Across town, more than 100 people have gathered at a rave hosted by Christopher's friend, Kara. But there's an uninvited guest about to crash the party who's going to leave everyone's jaws on the floor, literally. At the door, the bouncer thinks that Pooh is just another costumed partygoer, but he quickly finds out just how wrong that he is when Pooh jams a rusty pole straight through his head. Within seconds, the entire party instantly descends into chaos, as Pooh begins tearing everyone in arm's reach to shreds. And at this point, we can't even keep count of how many people he's killed. Hearing the police report over the radio, Christopher arrives at the club wielding a gat that he got from the kidnapper's house just as a mortally wounded Kara crashes down from the upper levels onto the floor in front of him. Tigger ambushes him from behind, but Christopher spins around and fires a single shot point blank into the creature's chest. Tigger slices Kara's head off and sprays Christopher with her blood, blinding him so that he can't line up another shot while the monster makes his escape. Just then, Pooh hears Christopher shouting from another section of the building and picks up a chainsaw before going after him. Pooh eventually corners Christopher out in the rain, but he picks up a club and uses it to fight back. In the scuffle, Pooh's chainsaw becomes engulfed in flames, somehow making him even more dangerous than he already was to begin with. Running for his life, Christopher retreats deeper into the woods, but ends up tripping and falling right in front of Pooh's grave. And Pooh stops in his tracks as the memories of his unholy creation suddenly come flooding back. Seeing this as an opportunity for a breakthrough, Christopher tries to apologize for what happened, but Pooh here is past the point of redemption and lifts Christopher into the air by his neck, about to finish him off. Suddenly, Lexi runs in to save him and gets herself caught in the process. Just as Pooh is about to force her down onto the chainsaw, Christopher grabs an axe and uses it to split the creature's skull, sending him tumbling back down into the same grave that he crawled out all of those years ago. Hearing the sound of sirens approaching, Christopher and Lexi stagger out of the woods towards the waiting police car. As luck would have it, they find Bunny there already waiting for them safe and sound. Driving home, Christopher breathes a sigh of relief that the nightmare is finally over. But we all know that these abominations don't stay dead for long, and it's only a matter of time before Pooh and his friends return for another chance at revenge. But what would you do, personally, if I saw a freakazoid version of Winnie the Pooh and Owl and Piglet walking around in the forest? You best believe I would be walking the other way. But let us know down in the comments what you would do. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'm that guy. I'll see you in the next video, and have a damn good day.